The following is a retelling of the events that occurred during the life and times of Public Enemy Number 1, John Dillinger, the most famous heister of all time.
You were cats hiding from dogs. Stupid rich ones. Two wall-mounted router boxes control the vault security system, and each one needs to be hacked separately. Once you're in, I can do the rest and shut down the system from here.
America reveres its outlaws. Always has. There's a romance around the lawless. Have been since the time of high seas piracy.
Great. Now you just need to find the second one. Look on the walls for the router boxes.
Make sure nobody runs away.
There's a router box right near you.
In his time, John Dillinger and his crew robbed over a dozen banks and 4 police stations. He escaped from prison twice, and he created his own media hype in an age where radio and newspaper magazines, the ones printed on actual paper, were the only forms of media publicity.
Down on the ground. Get down, asshole. Hey, don't you try and get clever with the phone, okay? I am very observant. Okay, hey, control. There seems to be a fire.
You're supposed to be hacking those
Wait a minute.
routers,
No,
remember?
hang on. No fire. I'm just hallucinating because I'm so fucking bored.
But how did he become such a successful bank robber? Dillinger's first take was $50 from a grocery store, where he whacked some poor guy over the head with a metal bolt wrapped in a piece of cloth to make a makeshift blackjack. He even brought a gun that somehow went off, but nobody was hit. So how did he get to be public enemy number 1? The answer lies with another bank robber.
Walls and router boxes. They go together like trouble and badges.
Enter Herman Lamb, a former Prussian soldier. He had the stroke of good luck to leave Europe just before Gavrilo Princip decided to shoot his shot and take out Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria, thereby kicking off a chain of events that would, like dominoes, eventually lead to World War I.
All right, give me some time to hack the system. In the meantime, see about finding those 3 laptops with the code snippets. That's one security box taken care of. That's 1. Remember the number and the color.
Anyway, Lamb, a dishonorably discharged former Prussian soldier with knowledge of tactics and military planning, sets foot on American soil, the land of opportunity. And what Lamb saw was an opportunity for heisting. He deduced that to rob a bank required proper planning. Lamb is the guy who pioneered the modern bank robbery techniques of casing a joint and having a getaway route planned out in advance. Lamb approached it like a military operation, planning it out to the last detail, leaving as little as possible, if anything, to chance.
Come on, I was taking a shit, okay? Is that okay with you? You gonna leave me alone or what?
He would make sure they knew as much as possible about the target before they went in. Lamb had gang members pose as journalists to ask the bank managers about the goings-on of their operations. They would go in and note the locations of vaults and safes. He had floor plans. He had the exits marked. He had a nondescript car with a high-powered engine waiting outside. Lamb even hired former race car drivers for his getaways. They would do trial runs, clock the times of the different routes and the different weather conditions. They spent days and weeks perfecting their operations, planning it all in great detail. Sounds common nowadays, maybe, but back then it was revolutionary stuff, really. Most bank robbers just blundered in with a gun and waved it in a teller's face and maybe got away with some petty change. Eventually, though, Lamb's good luck ran out. On December 16, 1930, in Clinton, Indiana, the gang's getaway driver panicked when a local man who was part of an organized group of citizens to help combat the rise of bank robberies walked up to their car with a shotgun.
Those routers hacked. Almost too easy. Okay, now how about those laptops?
The getaway car blew a tire, so the gang stole a second car. It had a speed limiter installed and could only do a measly 35 miles per hour. The gang found the truck, but its radiator overheated. They got hold of a fourth car, but it had less than a gallon of gas left in the tank. And back then, cars were built without fuel efficiency in mind. The gang was cornered by around 200 police officers and armed civilians. After a protracted gun battle, Herman Lamb and one other member of the gang committed suicide rather than face life in prison. The getaway driver was mortally wounded and later died. Two survivors, Oklahoma Jack Clark and Walter Dietrich, were sentenced to life in prison. They would serve their sentence in the Indiana State Penitentiary in Michigan City, Indiana. Back to John Dillinger. After being caught for the grocery store holdup, Dillinger's dad, who came from the spare the rod and spoil the child school of thought, convinced Dillinger to confess and plead guilty. Dillinger was sentenced to 10 to 20 years in a big boy pound me in the bum prison. He was gonna do some hard time. In the Indiana State Penitentiary in Michigan City, Indiana. Needless to say, Dillinger got to meet some hardcore criminals while locked up. He did time with the likes of Harry P. Pierpont, Booby Clark, Fat Charles Mackley, Homer Van Meter, Jack Red Hamilton, and of course, Oklahoma Jack and Walter Dietrich.
You have everything you need to open the vault. Keycard first, then enter the code. Don't get the wrong code, or the alarm will go off.
Dillinger swore when he was locked up that he would become one mean bastard while incarcerated. In the fall of 1929, 5 years into his sentence, the stock market crashed and burned. Attaining gainful employment on the outside suddenly became harder than bank robbery.
For you people, keycard and code, in that order.
And Dillinger was busy learning all he could about Herman Lamb's bank robbing techniques. Dillinger was eventually paroled on May 10, 1933. He had spent 9.5 years in crime college. Less than 6 weeks later, on June 21st, he and 3 men recommended by Pete Pierpont robbed Dillinger's first bank.
How far along are you on the vault? Use the card first, then enter the code.
Steady now.
Perfect. Now grab those stones.
The first bank, the New Carlisle National Bank in New Carlisle, Ohio, netted them $10,000. $10 grand in 1933, at the height of the Great Depression, was not peanuts, when everybody else was hoboing around the country with a bindle in their hands.
Okay, let's clear it out.
Use the glass code. You found a second vault?
Coño, what do we do now?
Well now, it's probably worth a hell of a lot. There's a juicy bonus waiting for us if you crack that second vault.
Did the gang sit on their laurels after a solid take? Did they hell? The Commercial Bank in Daleville, Indiana, July 17th. $3,500. The Montpelier National Bank, Montpelier, Indiana, August 4th. $6,700. The Bluffton Bank, Bluffton, Ohio, August 14th. $6,000. The Massachusetts Avenue State Bank, Indianapolis, Indiana, September 6th. $21,000. So, 5 banks in 4 months, almost 50 grand up. But Dillinger had no plans of living the high life just yet. He had plans for that money. However, he'd picked up a police tail in Dayton, Ohio, after the Bluffton bank heist. On September 22nd, Dillinger was captured and placed in the Allen County Jail in Lima, Ohio, to be indicted for hitting the Bluffton bank. On his person, police found plans for a jailbreak, but they couldn't make heads or tails of it, and Dillinger wouldn't answer any questions. 4 days after Dillinger was arrested, Said jailbreak happened, financed by the money Dillinger had stolen and planned since before he was paroled. The first Dillinger gang got out. Pete Pierpont, Ed Schaus, Fat Charles Mackley, Harry Copeland, Bobby Clark, Jack Red Hamilton, Oklahoma Jack Clark, Walter Dietrich, Joe Burns, Joseph Fox, and Jim Jenkins all escaped. They used 3 .45 caliber pistols Dillinger had smuggled into the jail, most likely in boxes of thread sent to the prison shirt factory. However, the precise method of delivery has never been confirmed. Once out, the crew decided they needed finances to break Dillinger out, so on October 3rd, they hit the First National Bank in St. Mary's, Ohio, for a take somewhere between $11,000 and $12,000. On October 12th, Columbus Day 1933, Pete Pierpont, Fat Charles Mackley, and Bobby Clark walked into the Allen County Jail in Lima and tried convincing the sheriff they were state prison officials, there to take custody of Dillinger and transfer him back to Indiana. The sheriff, Jess Sarber, asked to see their credentials, so Pierpont shot him. The crew got Dillinger out, and they made their escape.
We need to get the stuff out of here.
Get the bags back to the window washing rig.
Now that the gang was all back together, you might think they were getting ready to get down to business. And you'd be right, but not by robbing a bank. No, first they needed some updated hardware. So they robbed a couple of police stations.
I can move sapphires too, if you grab any along the way.
Not one fucking police station. 2 fucking police stations. On October 14th, Dillinger, Pierpont, and Walter Dietrich raided the cop shop in Auburn, Indiana for guns and bulletproof vests. On October 20th, they raided the one in Peru, Indiana. They were now set for bulletproof vests, guns, and ammunition. At this point, government officials put the National Guard on alert, afraid that the gang had declared an all-out war on the law. Meanwhile, the gang had retreated to Chicago.
One shiny piece of carbon. From the crust of the earth to our bank accounts. Gorgeous.
Now, for those of you not that well versed in United States history, the reason why back in the early 30s and in previous eras, why an individual or a gang could commit a crime in one state and then slip across the state line without being picked up is because in 1933 there was still no federal police force. In fact, the FBI was at the time known as the Bureau of Investigation and reported to the Attorney General. In 1933, it was linked to the Bureau of Prohibition and renamed the Division of Investigation. It wasn't until 1935 it would become an independent service within the Department of Justice, and then finally be rechristened as the Federal Bureau of Intervention Investigation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Prohibition wasn't even ended until December 5th, 1933. Plans were underway to rob a big boy bank, namely the Central National Bank of Greencastle, Indiana. Pete Pierpont sketched out the best escape routes. Fat Charles Mackley scouted the area and learned it was homecoming weekend for a local university. Quick side note for anyone who is not American. A homecoming weekend usually involves a lot of partying, as it celebrates former students coming back to school, and is often also traditionally held when a university sports team returns from the longest road trip of the season. There's usually a sporting event, like football or baseball, lots of barbecuing, beer, and good times. So the heist was a go for Monday 23rd of October. At 2:45 p.m., the crew parked a large Studebaker outside the bank, and Dillinger, Pierpont, and Mackley, and a fourth member of the crew strolled in like they owned the place, armed to the gills. Pierpont asked for a change for a 20, and then promptly pulled out his Tommy gun. The rest of the crew produced theirs, and they cleaned out the tellers, the vaults, everything but the kitchen sink, in 5 minutes. At 2:50, they drove off, never having fired a shot. The take was $74,000. Adjusted for inflation to 2020, that's almost $1.5 million. Oh, and across the street from the bank, the police inside the local police station never heard a thing. You know, in case you were wondering how big this crew's balls were. In November, back in Chicago, there was some internal friction within the gang. Copeland was drinking excessively and eventually got himself arrested. Ed Schaus had schemes of starting his own gang and breaking out on his own, so the gang paid him off, and he stole one of their cars and headed to California. Meanwhile, the gang had cased a bank in Racine, Wisconsin, the American Bank and Trust Company. They hit it on November 20th, and this is that famous one from the start of Michael Mann's film Public Enemies, the one with Johnny Depp. At 2:30 p.m., Pierpont walked in with a big red cross poster and put it up in the window to block the view from the teller's area from the street. Dillinger, Hamilton, and Mackley then entered the bank, and Mackley actually yelled, "Stick him up."
Yeah, hi. I want a large family pizza with pepperoni, cheese, and mushrooms. Maybe a 6-pack of beer.
One of the tellers who was on the phone failed to comply fast enough for Mackley's tastes, so he shot him in the elbow. As the teller fell to the floor, he activated the alarm connected to the police station. Dillinger marched the bank president to the main vault, along with the cashier and his assistant, to play Spin the Dial. 2 police officers responding arrived at the bank, but Pierpont and Mackley got the drop on them. With the vault cleaned out, the crew took the bank president, a woman, and a police officer hostage and walked them to the car outside. A few blocks later, when the car had to slow down due to traffic, they tossed the police officer off the running board and let him go. After leaving town, the crew loosely tied the bank president and the woman to a tree in the woods, asking them to stay put for 20 minutes. On December 13th, 7 robbers carrying chisels, sledgehammers, pistols, and shotguns walked into the Unity Trust and Savings Bank. The bank itself had been closed for a year at the time, but they still operated safety deposit boxes. Taking 5 men hostage, the crew went to work opening the safety deposit boxes. It took them over 3 hours, but they eventually walked out with somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of loot. The day after, on December 14th, Jack Hamilton dropped off a car at a repair shop, and someone reported it to the police as suspicious. Chicago police sent Sergeant William Shanley and his partner to respond to the call. While waiting for Hamilton to return, his partner went to phone it in. Hamilton returned, as Sergeant Shanley asked to see his driver's license. Hamilton instead produced a revolver and shot Shanley. Hamilton evaded capture. This would be the incident that led to the Chicago PD forming their Dillinger Squad. After murdering a CPD officer, and what with all the bank robberies, the jailbreaks, not to mention stealing weapons from fucking police stations, all in the last 6 months no less, creating absolute havoc in the Midwest area, the gang took a break. Retreating to Daytona Beach, Florida for a vacation over the holidays, Dillinger and Pierpont and their girlfriends, Billy Frechette and Mary Kinder, and the rest of the crew, laid low for a few weeks. It's reported that during their barbecue party on New Year's Eve, Dillinger emptied his Thompson submachine gun at the moon at the stroke of midnight. Isn't that just the perfect mental image of a gangster's lifestyle? It wouldn't last though. Their next score was the First National Bank in East Chicago, Indiana on January 15, 1934. Dillinger and Hamilton walked into the bank, and an unknown getaway driver sat across the street in a brand new 1934 Ford sedan. Dillinger calmly opened his leather case and pulled out his Thompson submachine gun, then ordered the crowd inside to get up against the wall. Hamilton began collecting the cash. However, the bank's vice president, who was in hiding, set off the bank silent alarm, connected directly to the police station. Dillinger reportedly told Hamilton, "Take your time, we're in no hurry." Outside, 4 officers arrived: Patrick O'Malley, Hobart Wilgus, Pete Whalen, and Julius Schrenko. Upon spotting Dillinger with a Tommy gun, Schrenko ran to a nearby drugstore to call for backup. Wilgus entered the bank, but Dillinger spotted him and relieved him of his service weapon, emptying it and giving it back to him. Dillinger then told Wilgus, "You oughtn't be afraid of this thing. I ain't even sure it'll shoot," gesturing to his Thompson. The backup call emptied the police station. Literally. They left 1 person in charge of the phones. The rest showed up outside the bank. When Dillinger and Hamilton exited, they did so with the vice president and Officer Wilgus as human shields. Patrick O'Malley saw an opening and took a shot at John Dillinger. 4 bullets struck Dillinger in his bulletproof vest and did nothing. Dillinger pushed the vice president away with the barrel of his Thompson, leveled it at O'Malley, and shot him dead. He will be the only homicide John Dillinger picked up in his crime spree. In the ensuing shootout, Hamilton took a bullet to the hand, making him lose a pistol. They made it to the getaway car. As they burned out of there, 2 game wardens showed up and laid into the vehicle with their guns as well. John Dillinger was identified by police and several witnesses. Jack Red Hamilton was identified by fingerprints taken off of the drop weapon. Going west to lie low for a bit, Dillinger, Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark went to Tucson, Arizona. They were recognized, and subsequently, they were all captured. In their possession was over $25,000 in cash, as well as several automatic submachine guns and pistols. They were extradited back to Indiana. Dillinger for the murder of Officer Patrick O'Malley, and Pierpont, Mackley, and Clark for the murder of Sheriff Jess Starber in Lima. Dillinger was sent to the Crown Point County Jail in Indiana, a prison said to be escape-proof. Police even made sure to post extra guards. On March 3rd, John Dillinger escaped from Crown Point using a phony gun carved in wood and dyed with shoe polish. He and one accomplice, one Herbert Youngblood, stole the sheriff's patrol car and made their getaway. They drove to Chicago. Dillinger teamed up with Babyface Nelson and his crew, reconnecting with Homer Van Meter. 3 days after breaking out of jail again, Dillinger and the gang robbed the Securities National Bank and Trust in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. The take was almost $50,000. A week later, they hit the First National Bank in Mason City, Iowa, on March 13th, and got away with $52,000. By now, the Division of Investigations was well and truly up their butts. The gang evaded capture by exchanging gunfire at the Lincoln Court Apartments in St. Paul, Minnesota on March 20th. John Dillinger had an appointment at a tavern in Chicago on the afternoon of April 9th. He sent his girlfriend Billy in first. She was arrested by waiting officers. He drove off. That was the last time they ever saw one another. Three weeks later, while hiding out at the Little Bohemia Lodge in Manitowish Waters, Wisconsin, the owners tipped off the U.S. Attorney's Office in Chicago, which subsequently involved the Division of Investigation. Again, they evaded capture, but not without losing Hamilton. He would spend days dying. On May 3rd, 1 week after Hamilton died, Dillinger, Van Meter, and Tommy Carroll hit the First National Bank in Fostoria, Ohio. They got away with $17,000. In the beginning of June, Dillinger and Van Meter reconnected with Babyface Nelson and his crew. On June 30th, Dillinger, Van Meter, Nelson, and an unidentified man who may or may not have been Charles Pretty Boy Floyd robbed the Merchants National Bank in South Bend, Indiana. The take was close to $30,000. This would be John Dillinger's last bank job. In July, the Division of Investigation received a tip from an associate of Dillinger, Anna Sage, who ran a brothel. She was willing to give them Dillinger in return for being allowed to stay in the United States. She was a Romanian immigrant, threatened with deportation for being of low moral character. On July 22nd, 1934, John Dillinger and his date, Polly Hamilton, went to the movies with Anna Sage. Coming out of the cinema at around 10:40 p.m., Dillinger was met by a mix of DOI agents and CPD officers. He was chased into an alley. He was shot and killed.
Time to make a hasty retreat, guys. Chopper's not leaving without you. That's it. Stay and grab more or get out. Your call.
Interesting side note, Anna Sage was deported anyway.
Out of there, guys. Via the platform. Book execution, people.
His heisting career lasted a year, but everybody still knows his name.